Welcome, everyone, to the Credible Nerds podcast. Today, we'll be talking Stephen King. We'll be doing our second review of his series of books. Last time, we talked about Firestarter, and we compared the book, the movie, the two movies, the most recent one as well as the older one. We talked about the book and the different aspects of that and how we liked it and everything. So, if that's something that you missed, definitely go back and check that out. We have it on our YouTube channel as well as on our audio feed. So check that out if you haven't already. But today we'll be doing our second review. We've decided to talk about Cujo. That was a book that was written, I believe, in the 80s. Jordan? Is that right?
1981. Yep.
Yeah. So early 80s. There was a movie that was produced and released around a couple years after that, I want to say.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's been a while for Cujo. For me, I never read the book till this go around, till we decided to read it a couple weeks ago. But I was aware of the movie. I remember as a kid, every time there was this dog that would chase you around the neighborhood or something, it was like, oh, it's a Cujo dog or whatever. So so the awareness of Cujo was out there in my childhood, but I never watched the show or read the book. So it's interesting that even this film or the book about this rabid dog had such an impact on pop culture and just culture in general for as long as it has. For you, Jordan, what was your introduction to Cujo? Kind of how did you hear about it? What did you think about it at that time?
So Cujo would have been just when I did my first read through of Stephen King. And so again, kind of as a history, I read The Shining was my first book, read The Green Mile. That's when I got banned from Stephen King as a middle school student.
From your mom.
And then when I was an adult, and the way I read things, I'm very particular. I kind of have to stick to order, and I don't like jumping around and stuff like that. And so when I was an adult, I just was like, hey, I'm going to start reading through Stephen King. So it just kind of fell in the order. So I was, early 20s. So 15, 16 years ago was my first read through. And then obviously this time again. So,
yeah. Were you aware of Cujo? Did you heard the jokes like I did as a kid? Was that something that?
Because again, like you brought up, Cujo's one of the, as prolific as Stephen King is, he doesn't have a lot of things that are just, when you have a disaster prom, you liken it to Carrie. When, you have Cujo, the car Christine. So there's a couple things that just are synonymous with certain things. All bad dogs are like Cujo. Yeah. So you just kind of know that. And I had never read it growing up, not until now. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting that backstory has always been, at least as far as back as I remember, it was always there. So that's cool. As far as the movie goes, when did you watch that for the first time?
So the first time I watched that was like 3 days ago.
Oh, really?
We were not, I had a very sheltered, couldn't watch a lot of horror stuff growing up or, scary things like that. And so it just kind of passed by me. And so now as I've been doing these rereads and going through and saying, hey, I want to see all the movies. I'm watching a lot of Stephen King movies for the first time, doing these rereads. So it's kind of nice being able to do that. So,
yeah. Okay.
So that was my first time seeing it. So,
yeah. Like I mentioned earlier off air before we started, I watched the trailer on iTunes. It was very 80s, low budget 80s. Yeah. So it was interesting to just watch that 2-minute clip. And trailers back then are way different than they are nowadays. I mean, a lot of fast action, quick cuts in today's trailers, but back then it was pretty slow, this voice kind of talking slowly over the clips that they're showing. It's very different.
Yeah,
it was interesting.
And to jump to the movie just really quick, but that was there was a period back then, kind of what we're seeing now, but Stephen King had taken off huge when The Shining came out.
Yeah.
And so everything was then, they're like, hey, we got to get just movies out based on your stuff. And so it was a couple years, but he had like 3 movies come out that year, Cujo being one of them. So yeah, they were just kind of pumping them out and just getting them done. But Stephen King really likes it. That's one of his, he says his favorite, one of his favorite adaptions is Cujo. So.
Okay. All right. So yeah, the story Cujo, the book, takes place in the 80s as well, right? Or 78, 79 maybe?
There wasn't anything like specific in terms of like, oh, this took place in the future or the past. It is kind of a sequel. And we started doing these rereads like with you, just with Firestarter, but a couple books before Firestarter, we have the book, let me look really quick, The Dead Zone. Sorry, I almost said The Dark Half, and I was like, that's not right. The Dead Zone, and that's the first Castle Rock novel he wrote, and so this one's the second. And so there is a lot of mention about Castle Rock or not Castle Rock, but of the Dead Zone in this book, so it does follow that story. So
okay,
because people know about what happened, because there was a serial killer on the loose there, and so that's kind of alluded to in this book, that maybe his soul of this serial killer played a role into what happened in Cujo. So
yeah, and I was going to ask you about that while I was reading it, because it did mention that killer pretty early on in the story, and it seemed pretty fleshed out. I was like, it seems like there's a backstory here that probably is a story somewhere at some point, or at least a short story maybe, because it was, like you said, they referred to it a couple times.
Yeah, Frank Dodd,
Frank Dodd
killer. Yep. So,
and part of it was, in the story, it kind of starts out with this boy he's having nightmares, trouble sleeping at night, and he swears he sees this monster in his closet. And it that's when it starts talking about Frank Dodd and his history and his murders, that his spirit is perhaps still haunting and causing problems. Is that kind of your take, that it is his spirit or his influence somehow back from the grave?
Well, it's one of those things that's never mentioned in reading. So I have a couple books. I've got like one book that ties the whole Stephen King universe together, and it kind of finds all the pieces and stuff like that. And so I'm not sure which book I have. A lot of them just kind of follow his works, but one of the books I read, it did mention that the house that the Trentons live in, that's their last name, the Trentons of this family, is actually the house that Frank Dodd lived in. Okay. So his spirit is still like there. So I didn't hear that on like an official, like, hey, Stephen King said this, but
he didn't tweet
someone said it in the book. So I don't know if that's just a folklore or what, but that is kind of the thought. And when we see what happens, like I'm trying to think to myself, like, a rabid dog, how, or any animal, if it's trying to get you, like what extent would it be like, well, I couldn't get to you, so I'm done trying to get to you? Because with Cujo and Donna Trenton, when she's stuck in the Pinto, like it's almost personal, like he's out to get her. And so that's where you then tend to think, okay, maybe it is a little more just supernatural. Maybe there is a demonic, or not demonic, but like maybe there is an evil spirit that's possessed this dog also. So
because the Trentons moved into that house pretty recently, as far as the story goes, right? Within a couple of years, maybe.
They
moved from the big city to there, and we'll get into that in a little bit as we go on, as far as what we think. But so they're living there. Their child sees this monster in the closet, and they come up. The dad, Mr. Trenton, I forget his name.
Vic,
yeah. So Vic helps his son come up with this mantra, this saying, to help keep the monsters away, and it works for him. It helps him sleep at night. So that's pretty cool. So there's that family. The Trenton family is one of the main families, and then this other family that lives a few miles away, different part of town on the outskirts. They're the ones that own Cujo, and their family dynamic is pretty similar in the sense that there's a mom and a dad and a young son. But they have the dog Cujo, and he's a Saint Bernard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's their name again?
So they're the Cambers.
Cambers.
So you have Joe Cambers, his wife Charity, and then their son Brett.
Yeah.
Cambers.
And so,
or Camber.
And he's a mechanic. He makes his living as a mechanic, and they're a little on the poorer side, while the Trentons are, he's an advertising guy, so he makes a lot of money. So there's that difference, but so as far as they go, the Trentons go to the Cambers to talk about their car because the mom's Pinto isn't working very well, so got some problems. So that's when the two families meet. The two boys, they see Cujo and they kind of play with the dog a little bit. The mom's a little nervous that this huge dog is playing with her son, that they don't know anything about this dog, but he seems nice, right? Cujo's, and we get a little bit of inner dialogue as the story goes on from Cujo, and at the beginning he's this nice, happy, fun-loving dog, right? And as far as that dialogue goes for you, Jordan, did that work? I mean, what did you think about that whole thing with knowing what the dog's thinking, what Cujo's thinking?
Well, in a sense, it really, brings home, as I kind of jump around a lot, but it really brings home the tragedy of the whole story, because he really was a good dog, like not just a whatever dog, but he really he was a good, not just he was good with kids. He listened to everybody. He was just a good dog. And so I think that helped almost kind of build his demise a little bit, and being this wasn't just some random, dog that we didn't care about. He was good. So.
Yeah. I think you bring up a good point. It is a tragedy, and it's the tragedy of Cujo. I thought that inner dialogue that we get from Cujo takes us on that journey, and the dog's a character in and unto himself, just as much as Brett, the boys, the mom, and everybody, right? At first we like him, and we kind of feel bad as time goes on, and he starts to change.
And the difference with Cujo versus in the last episode we talked about the main villain from Firestarter. And with this one, it's just there was never a point where he was acting maliciously other than just his nature, right? Everything, sounds are bugging him, so he's trying to get to the sound. And so at the end, spoiler alert, when everything is all done and and Cujo's perishing, that was his last thought, was I just wanted to be good, and I couldn't help it. And now you're just oh man, poor dude. So, and the whole thing, we have now this talk of, ooh, there's a bad dog. That dog is like Cujo. But really, he never was. He just got sick in it, so his tale was very tragic in that sense, because again, unless we want to say, okay, he was being possessed by the spirit of Frank Dodd and trying to get to, Donna and Tad in the car. But other than that, I think it was just bad for him. It just sucked, kind of the whole thing. So that was my whole takeaway from the book, was everything just sucked. Yeah. I really like the book. The book is good, but I'm just man, that sucked.
Yeah.
So.
I did kind of think that as well. It's oh man, he's such a good puppy, or a good dog. His owner, Tad, loved him and all that. He was really worried about him.
Yeah.
But so Cujo, he's out playing in the fields. They lived on the edge of town, so there was all these this forest, I guess, or just a lot of empty space, and he was out playing around. He's chasing this rabbit who dives into this hole. It ends up being like a small cave where some bats are, and he's trying to get in, and he disturbs the bats, and one of the bats bites him on the nose, and this bat has rabies, so therefore it gives Cujo rabies. And then there's just, there's a few days where you just kind of go through Cujo slowly starting to fall to the effects of rabies and how it changes him and it drives him mad, and that's what causes all the drama and the terror and stuff, is the rabies. But as far as the Frank Dodd thing, I think there is a little bit of it, but I don't know how it happens, because it's not like because the monster, their spirit was still in the closet throughout most of the story, because at some point when the dad, Mr. Chambers, he goes back home, he kind of senses the evil in the closet while Cujo is attacking his wife and child in the Pinto miles away. So it's like, how much influence did Frank Dodd have? But I kind of got the sense that there was some influence, because like you said, it was Cujo started targeting, the mom and the kid, and it was a personal vendetta to get him.
Yeah.
And so I can see how you could bring that in too, but I don't know. It wasn't really clarified. I don't know if it needs to be clarified, but it's still kind of out there, kind of like, what's happening there? So, but yeah, so there's some drama with the Chambers, with Vic and Donna. She grew up, or she was in New York City. They moved out to the boonies, and she was just worried that her life was over, basically. She missed all the parties and the fun things that they were doing in New York City. Vic would go to work, she'd stay home and take care of the kid. And so she just got bored. She ended up getting involved with this guy that worked there in their town. And they ended up sleeping together a couple times. And then she realizes, okay, this is dumb, I'm going to call this off. And so she does, but the guy gets mad. And then he lets Vic know, hey, I've been sleeping with your wife. What do you think about that? And he's kind of a jerk. And so then this drama between Vic and Donna happens, and, they have to work things out. And then, so you got that going on. And then on the other side of things with the Chambers,
Charity and Joe.
Joe, yeah. They're having problems too. Joe's kind of this hick guy that wants to control everything, and Charity. Charity. She wants, him to be nice to her, and she's worried about how Brett. I'm getting these names mixed up. Brett. She's worried how Brett's gonna grow up under the influence of Joe, and so there's some conflict there. And so you got these two families. You got the one dad, Vic, who is just this normal guy, loves his wife. You got Donna, who messes up, and then you got Joe, who's a jerk, and Charity, who's a nice girl. And I honestly thought at the end the two bad spouses would die, and then those two would end up somehow. That's the direction I thought it was going, that they would console each other in their grief at the end of the story. And you wouldn't necessarily see them get together, but then they'd be like, oh, he's a widow too. Gotta go down that road. So I don't know. What do you think about how those two couples compared, and their different relationships, and how things ended up for them?
So again, to add on to the tragedy that is Cujo with everything, because for the Trentons, their lives were basically ruined. And if we want to talk just like the wives, so for Donna, her life pretty much ruined because of all of this, everything that happened. And I don't, how everything played out. And with Charity, everything played out for her very well. And so it was hard to kind of cheer her on, because now she's getting the life she kind of always wanted, and she's getting free from everything. And it's a really good thing that's happening to her.
Yeah.
While at the same token, it's really bad what's happening for other people. And you know, and King makes you care for both of them at the same time. So it's not like you can be like, okay, well, yeah, it's good that it's happened to her, but like I don't care about it. Like you are actually kind of caring for her too in her predicament. And so that's again that just plays into this whole, you know, do you root for her and do you feel, you know, kind of guilty when she's kind of like, ooh, yay, like look what's happened.
Yeah.
You know, I can now escape because she, you know, Charity was stuck. Like she had a husband that, you know, hey, this is the way things are. My boy's gonna be with me. You know, that's she always had to kind of trade off for, you know, hey, can you take him hunting? And I know what that's gonna bring about if I can take him to visit my sister and let her see some city folk. And you know, so she was kind of trapped as well,
Mm-hmm.
but she was able to get out of it
Yeah.
because of all this stuff. Where for Donna, it did not work out. So
Yeah. For those guys, the Trentons, it was a tragedy all the way around for them.
mhm.
You know, their marriage was in shambles. Donna gets ravaged by this crazy dog, and eventually their son dies as a result of being stuck in that car for the whole time. While the other side, it was just the jerk husband gets killed, and party's like, okay, cool.
And even
Glad-
she was kind of like,
yeah.
okay, well,
Dang it, too
you
bad.
know, because it was kind of those relationships back in the day where it was like, okay, I fell into this relationship like when I was young and I'm stuck in it, you know. I mean, there seemed to be kind of that underlying love, you know, of marriage, but you know, again, she was kind of like, okay, good, he's dead. This means I'm free. Like that was kind
Yeah.
of her thought process there. So
Yeah. And she had been contemplating leaving before this whole stuff happened. So
yep.
for her, it worked out not too bad. I'm sure part of her was sad that her husband was killed
Mhm.
in that way. I don't think anybody would want that to happen to their spouse, no matter how much they hated him.
I'm trying to remember too in the book. I even think she poses a question because her son's pretty sad, and she's like, "I wonder if he's more sad that his dad is dead or that his dog is dead."
Yeah.
And so then that's kind of like, oh yeah, you know, it was again for them, it was a happy ending, you know, if you will. So
Yeah. Yeah. So my, oh, yeah, then there's the neighbor, the war veteran, who's this
mhm.
crass, drunk guy that lives next door. And he's just problems
Victim
too.
one,
Yeah.
victim
Victim number
one.
one. Cujo takes him down pretty easy. He's kind of the same thing where like he dies and you're like, well, he's kind of a loser anyway and rude and just not that good of a guy. So it's like,
hmm
big loss. So I'd say how many, there was those two, Joe, the neighbor, the
So Joe
cop.
and the are we talking their deaths?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Joe and the neighbor, the cop that Cujo actually kills, whether we call, you know, Tad you know, an indirect casualty because Cujo didn't get to him, but he
Yeah.
perished in being stuck in the car. So that would be five, and I think that's what I think the book even tallies a number and says like 5 deaths or something like that. So
Five. So one, five or four.
let's see. Oh yeah, did I say?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
the neighbor.
Joe, his friend, yeah, the cop, and Tad. Yeah, so
Yeah.
four people.
So
Four
four.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for some reason, I thought I had never read the book or saw the movie, but for some reason, I thought the story was about Cujo going on a rampage around town and just attacking people at night. You know, they're out for a run and he chases them down and kills them, or whatever. And so when the story ended up being pretty self-contained in the their house in the Pinto, just that one spot in the driveway, basically, I was a little
Yep.
disappointed. Like, I thought it was going to be more epic than this, or at least a little more involved. Um, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad because I wouldn't want to read about this dog just terrorizing this town, killing all these people. So I don't know. I was a little disappointed, but then I was like, okay with it at the end. So as far as the believability of Cujo killing these people and overpowering them in a lot of senses. How how did you take that? Was that
Well, so, one of the kind of, we talked a little bit about establishing how good of a dog Cujo was, because, we've all been there where, you go to knock on someone's door or something and there's a
yeah
dog growling at you, right? And you're like,
yeah
nope, I'm not having this,
yeah it's true
But the thing with Cujo is when he first came upon the victim one, the Joe's friend, he didn't instantly have that like freaked out scared because it was Cujo. So it's like,
yeah
okay, I know you. So then he got caught off guard. Also didn't help that he was like completely plastered when he
yeah
got murdered,
still
But
hungover.
yeah, but like that was I think kind of part of it was he didn't instantly freak out and be like, hey, the neighbor's crazy dog is coming to get me. It was
Yeah
it's Cujo, and I know Cujo, and then all of a sudden he got him, right?
yeah
And then and then the again, they're so isolated in their town, nothing bad's happening. So when Joe's trying to figure out what happened to his buddy, he was like, what happened here? And then he kind of got ambushed a little bit. So, I mean,
yeah.
I could see it. I could see it a little bit. Like,
What about the cop?
the
He had his
so the cop,
gun, all that.
yeah, that one was the hard one. And that was almost, I don't know, of like a, stunned. He did, and again, he did so well in the book before. He was the main investigative cop to get Frank Todd, and so like kind of mind-boggling. But in the sense too, that was also the theme kind of the book of just everything that could have gone wrong went wrong.
Yeah.
Right. This should have been an easy. Hey, I got stuck in my car for 20 minutes, and someone came and got me, and off we go. Like that was kind of, I kept getting the sense like everything that could have happened to prevent. And so then you have like, that is kind of some outside force that is making this happen, but everything went wrong. Yeah. The cop just decided not to phone in that the stuff is going on. And he decided to look at it himself. The postman did at the and in the movie, it's a little different, but he like last second, someone's like, hey, they held the mail like last second. And you're just like, oh man, that could have, that could have been it. The person that Donna was having an affair with erased her, she wrote a message saying, this is where I'm at. And he erased it to, when he trashed her house. So like everything just went wrong for him. So that's kind of another theme of the book. So, in that sense, you could say, okay, I guess it is plausible. And in a normal sense, it'd be easy to, something would happen. You'd get some help, but not then.
Yeah. And while reading the story, first let me preface it with, I used to watch the X-Files back in the day, and I still watch it every once in a while. And that was set in the 90s, mid-90s through the 2000s, as well as like Smallville, right? Early 2000s. And there's all the stuff that happens, but no one is able to get a picture of it, or, they can't just call their friend and say, hey, I'm over here. Come get me. It's got to be this long, drawn out, assumptions made, wrong decisions made. And it was kind of like that with this story. It's like the whole time I'm like, well, if she had a cell phone, she could just call someone and be like, hey, this crazy dog's attacking me. Come help me. Boom. Story's over. Right.
Yep.
So I kept thinking about that, and like, no, this is the 80s. No one really had cell phones back then, and all that, the mail and landlines and, all that stuff. But it did keep, coming back to my mind. Well, this wouldn't happen today. But how would you write this story today? Do you have any ideas of how you would make it just as intense, but yet people still have cell phones and all that tech?
Well, what you would have to do is, like kind of you said, the typical horror movie, everyone has to whatever you would do the complete opposite, right? So leave your cell phone at home.
Yeah. Your
Don't tell
battery
anyone.
dies.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, I mean, that would be this. That would be the sense, and I mean, you could almost say it though, because that was part of it. Was he lived? He was like the last house in the town, right? And so you could maybe be like, hey, I don't have cell service.
Yeah.
I don't have anything in my car to help me out. I that when I finished reading the book, I'm like, man, I got to start putting some water bottles in
Yeah.
the car just in case. You never know, but things you don't think about that could strand you. So yeah, you get to thinking about that sort of stuff. This one hit a little more close to home for me because I've got a 6-year-old, and so it's like, man, if her and I are out, and that's what I kept thinking too during the whole reading the book, is I'm just like, okay, like Donna, you've got to like do something.
Yeah.
Like, when is the point when you stop waiting and you
Mm-hmm.
do something? And that again, I keep going back to the tragedy of the whole thing, but when she decided to do something, she killed him easily. She killed Cujo easily. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, not easily in the sense like she got ripped up, but that was also, she got basically bitten and attacked when she was still kind of not trying to do something. She saw the baseball bat, she got out, she took care of him. Had she done that right then, like when he first started attacking the car, then who knows what would have happened. And so that's part of the tragedy of the whole thing, was when she got the courage to take action, she was successful. And, sadly she waited too long. So
Yeah. Yeah. They were in the car for like 3 days.
3 days.
Yeah. So if she would have done something, to your point, the first day, probably would have got bitten and stuff, but she would have been all right.
And I know Cujo's getting weakened as he's,
True.
He's smashing his head into the car and stuff like that. But yeah, that's what that was what was frustrating for me reading it. So I'm like, eventually you gotta do something.
Yeah. A big plot point, or not plot point, but thought in her mind was, I just got to run to the door, get inside, close the door. And she kept thinking about it, but never did it. Would you have done it?
And I guess to her defense too, because then I can see, because that's what she was thinking about too. Okay, hey, I run to the door and I get tackled and killed. Now I've left my kid all by themselves, and so that's the other struggle. So it's hard. I'm a big wuss when it comes to mean dogs, and so I'm like, I don't know what I would do, like, when that would kick in, when that, and honestly, I don't think anyone, unless you've been in the situation, could truly say, okay, this is when I would do something. Like, I don't know. I can't say like, oh, I would have done this day 1 or day 2. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm a big wuss, so.
So you wouldn't have gone for the door?
I don't think so. I'm slow. I'm big and slow. I can't run very good. I have bad knees. I'm not making that door. So.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of times where I thought, from the background, like, hey, now's your chance. Like, he's gone, or try this, or, there was an instance where the phone was ringing, and again, that's where I was thinking, like, when does a dog stop chasing? Because there was a time in the book where the phone's ringing and Cujo's just going after the phone. I would have taken my kid and ran the other way, but when
snuck out the
who
other
knows?
door.
Like, going out the other door and just start running down the road at least. But who knows if he starts chasing you? That's kind of the unknown that she had. So
yeah, that's the genius of the book, I think, is it's like, well, why don't you just do this? I'd do that. I'd totally do that. But she doesn't. So then, it's, you just keep talking to the characters like, no, don't do that. Do this. So that's their predicament. They're stuck in their car, that Pinto, for 3 days. Cujo's guarding them. And then you got the side stories where Charity and Brett are visiting Charity's sister. And that's when she's thinking about leaving her husband. And she eventually decides not to, right? She's like, oh, I'll just go home.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
So she made the decision. So That's good, because I think if you're like, you make the decision to leave him and then you go home and he's dead, you'd be like, oh, you kind of feel a little guilty.
Yeah.
So, like, so that's good that she decided to be loyal and stick through it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. And then the other side with Vic and his business partner, their business is falling apart. Is there any continuation of that story in other books?
No,
Okay.
no, at least not that I remember. I mean, that's the thing. Castle Rock plays such a huge point, but I don't know if there's even anything of like, hey, this ad agency or what, what was going on there. But
Yeah.
that was their slogan, which again kind of plays into the book. Nothing wrong here. They kept saying that, nothing wrong here, where everything is going wrong,
Yeah.
wrong in the background. So
Yeah. And that in and of itself, I thought was an interesting plot point or storyline, I guess. You could write some stories off of that, how the kid's eating the cereal and he starts throwing up blood, and the actor who plays the professor's all depressed, and I don't know, it seems like there's some story material there. So.
Well, and they talk, in that whole thing, because the whole time, Vic is gone during this whole, thing, and they're like, well, I don't know if this was the book or the movie, or if it was, just in some side reading, but they're like, Vic was never there when his family needed him the most. It was the kind of the criticism, but then at the same sense, he's out, he's the breadwinner, so he's working his butt off trying to save his company, and so in that sense, he is working hard and trying to help his family, so it's kind of that hard thing for him, and guilt for him too, feeling, hey, I should have been here. I could have done something, and but again, that plays into the whole theme.
Yeah, definitely. He's not like Joe. His big plan was to
No.
go get drunk with his buddy and sleep with some prostitutes and just go
Yep.
party it up. He's not doing that. He's like
Mhm.
you said, he's trying to save his company, and that's super stressful for him. And he's just found out his wife's cheating on him, and so he's a nervous wreck the whole time throughout the whole story with reason. So yeah, yeah, I'm gonna pay attention to future stories. Maybe their ads pop up. Well,
Yeah.
one of the characters watching TV or something.
Mhm.
That'd be kind of cool to pay attention to and see. But yeah, so as far as the movie goes, how well does it compare? Does it follow the storyline of the book, or
So
how's that?
it follows pretty good. It's the biggest critique with Stephen King, the movie writer, versus his movies, or the book writer versus his movies, is he does so much work into character building and the intricacies of the characters. Again, so in the movie, you don't really get this sense of what Charity's going through on a personal level, and what Vic and Don are like. You don't get that sense. It's all just kind of rushed, and she's like, hey, I won the lottery, I bought you a thing for the car, I'm leaving, I'm going on a trip. You don't really know why she needs to do that so badly, so that's always the biggest complaint. But the book followed, or the movie followed, pretty good. It's pretty intense. The kid Tad in the movie, man, when he's screaming because the dog's getting him, I was like tensing up, because and they're like, it's all pretty much natural. We just had a dog pounding on the car door and the kids is screaming, and so it's it's pretty good. Obviously the biggest change was in the movie, Tad survives. They were able to, she's able to get the dog and kill the dog and get help, and he lives. And so that's kind of the biggest change. And Stephen King, in looking back at it, he's like, movies are, he's like, a different emotional level than books, and so sometimes people have to live, or else the way you see it in the movie. So that's the biggest change, is everyone happily ever after in the movie. So
does Joe die?
Yeah, so Joe dies. I'm gonna just keep calling him victim number one until his name hits into my thing. But they both die. The cop dies. I'm pretty sure the cop dies. but then yeah, they were able to save the kid. That was
Okay.
the biggest difference. So
Yeah, and I like that because I think the the boy's death was just out of the blue because towards the end he's still he's barely conscious but he's still alive, and then uh, Donna overcomes Cujo and kills him, and then next thing you know, the boy's dead. And I was
well, and
like,
it does
whoa.
well, and it does kind of. I always thought too about it though, because then the question Vic asks is, how long has he been dead?
Yeah.
So then I think to myself, I wonder if she's like, like how maybe he died the first day, like,
Yeah.
and
Because
she's
he
just
doesn't
kind
really
of
do much.
no, and she's just kind of in her mind thinking all this
Mm.
stuff. Like, who knows? That question always really hit me when he's like, how long has he been dead?
Mm.
And so yeah, I don't know if it was just right then, if she was just, and that again, kind of the brilliance of the book for me. Did she just barely miss it in time? Was everything she did for naught because he was dead way before then? Like, you never know, and they never tell you. So
Yeah.
I always liked that line because it brings a lot of doubt, and again, like with the book, like just nothing worked out well. Like,
Yeah.
this is just kind of the tragedy of the story. So
Yeah. And I actually like that explanation because it did seem just sudden out of the blue, and it could happen, but they fought for so long, he struggled for so long, and then help finally arrives, but he dies like 30 seconds before,
yeah,
and I didn't like that. But I like your question. How long has he been dead? Like the dad asked. Um, maybe he died the night before. Mom's just
Mhm.
hallucinating, or she hasn't had water either. So
Yeah.
I like that. I hadn't thought of that. Okay. Um, but I do wish the boy had survived. That just because, like you said, there's a tragedy. All these bad things happen, and then the worst thing happens, and you're just like, oh,
Hmm.
this book sucks. I hate it. Everyone
That
dies.
was that was I put it down and I was just like, well, that sucked. Like, again, and then I enjoyed the read. It wasn't that, like, please end now. Like,
Right.
I just read it. It was like, that sucked.
Yeah.
Like, nothing, nothing good except for, again, now Charity and Brett, and they're selling the farm, and
Yeah.
she sold the brand new equipment she had bought for her husband, and they're taking off for a better life in the city. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of the only only positive that comes out of everything. So
Yeah. Because
Brett gets a new puppy. I think
yeah.
someone gave him a new puppy, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, nice. And you know, this other family, their life is just completely ruined, and you just, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a not a happy ending. So
Yeah. Vic and Donna, I don't think they're still questioning, right? At the end of the story.
yeah, they were just kind of like, what do we do now? And
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
just kind of start going through the motions, almost kind of sense. And
Yeah.
you never really find out if if it works out or not. So
Yeah. Do either of those two families, they pop up later in any other stories?
no, not that I can recall. So I
Okay.
mean, you'll get mentioned, so Castle Rock, the town, is just kind of takes on this persona of a cursed town.
Mm-hmm.
They've got Castle Rock, and then you have Derry, and
Yeah.
those are the two, cursed places. But so in future books, like, they'll be like, oh yeah, the summer of '81 when Cujo killed everybody. Like, so they'll bring that back up, but I don't think they mention any of the other players by name. So
Mm. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. So like you, I wasn't happy when I finished it, but as I thought about it later, because it does stick with you. I mean, that's the
hmm
power of the story is you think about it like, man, what would I do? Or I wish that would have happened. Or so you still think about it, and that's a sign of a good story, whether you like it or not.
yep.
You still think about it after the fact. And so I do like it. I have criticisms, but I mean, I think that's normal for any story, really. I didn't hate it. I'd probably give it an 7.8 or 8 out of 10 overall. I mean,
Yeah, it's higher up there for me as well. So
yeah. Okay. Well, as far as moving forward, I wanted to bring up something. So there's these TV shows, I think, or movies. They always show like the producer signs, the companies. And isn't there one called Castle Rock Entertainment?
there is. They do like Seinfeld.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
so. And I don't. I've always wondered. Maybe I'll have to look into this for the next episode because I've always wondered. Oh, looks like I'm frozen. But I've always wondered if that had any like someone, if that's like a location that's there, or if somebody actually was, hey, a nod to Stephen King. But
Yeah.
Steinfeld doesn't really have a lot to do with Stephen King,
Okay,
so
right.
I don't know. But that's
Yeah,
where I've seen it most. Is
Okay.
they did like all the Seinfeld, I think so.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I have seen that company.
Yeah. I couldn't remember where I saw it, and then you mentioned Seinfeld. I was like, oh yeah. So there's
Yep.
probably not a huge connection, but all right.
I'll have to look.
Yeah. So moving forward, what book are we going to read next? What's the next one on the list?
Well, so the two options, we just keep going forward from here, or we go and start with Carrie and kind of progress that way. So the next book in line is, as I get up, and as a short story collection, a novella collection actually. So we got Shawshank Redemption is coming up. I think that's the big one from that collection of stories. So
Okay. Well,
so however you want.
Yeah. Is Carrie the first story that he wrote?
Carrie is the first book.
Okay.
I've always wanted to look, authors back in the day, and I don't know how well it works now, but he wrote so much stuff in magazines too, like stories. So you'll have some stories that predate Carrie, even maybe some stories that were made into a movie, because then he collected them in short story collections. I think Children of the Corn was maybe written or published before Carrie in a magazine, or something like that. But Carrie is the first book.
Okay.
That's what I always start with is
Okay.
Carrie.
Yeah,
So
I think if we would do that, I think I would want to start there.
okay.
Just because on our website we have a list of all his books that we're going to read, and it does start with Carrie. What about, you mentioned that there was a short story, The Dead Zone, that talked about
So the Dead
preview-
Zone
prequel?
is it's a novel in itself. It's his I have to keep looking at my bookshelf. 1, 2, 5th novel. So the Dead Zone is the 5th one that he wrote. So
Okay. So it
So you'll
was
have-
written before Cujo.
yeah, it was written. Yeah, it didn't come out as like a prequel. It was, that's kind of the nice thing about reading the stuff in order, because he does, throw these little, callbacks and Easter eggs, if you will, of, hey, remember this dog. Like Cujo will come up in future books, and
Okay.
especially when he hits these towns too, like Castle Rock. Now everything will kind of, the people know, they remember what's happened in the book. So they're not true standalone. Well, they're standalone books, but not, true ones. So
Yeah. Like you said, Easter eggs.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I always like going through an order. So
Yeah, let's do that. Let's
Okay.
start with Carrie. What's after Carrie?
So after Carrie is Salem's Lot, and the nice thing about that, although the movie just got pushed back, but they have never made an actual movie on Salem's Lot. They've had 2 made-for-TV specials, but there's never been a movie, and so this is the first movie finally after what 50 years. 50 years it's been.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
and that's coming out here. It was supposed to come out in September, but it got pushed back to next, like February or March or something like that. But Um, but yeah, so so you've got Carrie, Salem's Lot, and then The Shining is the next. The Shining and The Stand. So some pretty big, well-known heavy hitters to start off. So
right out of the gate. Yeah, let's do that.
Yep.
We'll start with Carrie, number 1 on the list, and we'll go from there. Like I said, you can check out our website, crediblenerds.com/Stephen King. But just do there's a, let me look it up real quick. If you go to our main page, our home page, there's a menu item called Series Review, and it's a drop-down list that has Stephen King on it. You can select that, and it will take you to the list, the chronological reading order. And yes, it's crediblenerds.com/Stephen-King. So check that out. And we'll post our links to our YouTube videos and our written reviews as well on that page, so you can, do your homework.
Carrie has got 2. So they had the original Carrie movie, the famous one, the Brian De Palma film, and then made for TV movie. And then you've got the new, well, I say new, 10 years old now, remake of Carrie. So
3 movies.
And then you could even branch off and go with the Rage Carrie 2.
You want a deep dive, deep cuts.
Films there. Yeah. So, but yeah, so quite a bit of film, and that's I always like it when you have 2 or 3 movies to really compare. So
yeah, okay. Who's Carrie in Carrie?
In the original one,
Sissy
Spacek. Is Carrie.
How old is she in that?
Oh man, in that one, I think in their teens. I think it was one of her first roles.
Wow.
So
I'm gonna have to watch that one.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
So
so if you're watching this or even listening to this podcast episode, definitely check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. All that stuff that all the YouTubers say. Subscribe, like, share, comment, all that stuff. There's a reason for it. We want to increase our presence and have people watch and listen to these Stephen King episodes. But definitely subscribe to our channel. Get our subscriber count up there. It costs you nothing, literally. If you subscribe and you, after a while, you're like, it's not my thing, it's fine. We get it. I subscribe to a ton of people on YouTube that I listen or watch their stuff like once a year, right? No cost to me, no penalty. Just helps everybody out. So help us out. Follow our social media stuff. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Give us some feedback. Make some comments. People comment on our videos, and it's a great way to interact with our fans. I love it. I love listening to what people have to say, reading what people have to say, and kind of going back and forth. Let us know if you like it, if you don't like it, what we could do better. If you have a question for Jordan, if you want to stump the expert and want to ask Jordan a question, do that, and we'll see what he says. Definitely, you can email us. If you have comments or questions, you can email us at nerds@crediblenerds.com. Just email us, and if you have questions, we'll read them on the show, on the review, and we'll talk about it. Like if you have some questions or comments about Carrie, send it to us, and we will read it on air as we do our reviews. So thanks for watching. Any final comments about Cujo before we wrap things up, Jordan?
Not about Cujo, but I just want to give a quick shout out. It's coming up next month. So this is not Cujo topic, but I don't want people to miss this because it's super cool if they can see it. So Stephen King, on some of his stories that no one owns the rights to, and they're mostly his short stories. If you are an up-and-coming filmmaker trying to, find some source material to work with, he will sell you the rights to his stories for $1.
Wow.
And you can make a movie and you can market it as based on Stephen King's whatever to get people to watch it. You can't, there's a lot of rules that come with it. You can't make money off of it or something, but it's to help filmmakers. And I can find those dates. I can actually look right now, but they're having a festival. They did it for COVID last year. They did a whole festival, and they were able to get permission from Stephen King to compile a whole bunch of these movies and show them over a 3-day like marathon of a movie thing. And you just can see all sorts of just interesting films. And some of the films, like there would be 4 different versions of it, because it's just, oh, I got it, and now I made it, and now I made it, and stuff like that. So it's going to be, let's see, it's in August. And of course, oh no, here we go. August 19th, 20th, and 21st. So it's called Stephen King Rules. If you look at them on Twitter, or look it up on Facebook, or, you know, I can look at figuring out how to get a link out there. But it was one of the coolest things I did during COVID was watch this festival. So
nice.
It's coming out there. So in case we don't have time to shout it out, like it's fun to watch just to see these. And you have some like high school kids making a movie for like a film class, and then you got professional people making a movie. So you got a whole range. So I'm really looking forward to that in a month. So
we'll post the link in the comments below, in the description below, and then we'll make a blog post on our website. So check it out.
I will be live watching the whole thing. I've booked it out, and it's like 12 hours a day for 3 days. So
wow. Do you have to pay for it? Is it like
no, it's all free. And normally these festivals, you know, like at Sundance, maybe you'll get one of the films or something, you know. And so these guys got together, and, you know, because one of the things that you can't do is like you can't post them to YouTube. You can't share it. Like it's just really to get your name out there. Yeah. And funny, well, not funny, but interesting trivia. The director that made The Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption, he kind of got his start making one of these dollar baby movies back in the 80s. Wow. And got his name out there. And so it's really cool. And so that's all free. They're actually doing it at a physical location, but they got permission again to stream it again. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And then they do Q&As with the directors afterwards. So it's a blast. I liked it. So just trying to spread that awareness out of this festival. So
that's cool. So you can't, like, if you miss it, you can't go back and watch later.
No. And they even every day, the second it ended, they signed off and took it off. So you have to watch it live. You can't pause it and rewind it. So it's kind of like just being there. But yeah, and they had they were able to put up all the like director, you know, interviews afterwards and stuff. But yeah, that's one of the stipulations for having the rights to these movies is you can't have it up. It's a kind of a one-time showing, and then you're done. Well, not one time, but like you can take it to films. I think you get the rights for a year. So they'll compile, but then these people keep all their movies. So some of them are a couple years old. That's why you can see a handful of different movies. But pretty cool project. So
yeah, definitely have to check it out. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. Definitely check out our next podcast review, and probably later this month or early August, we'll review Carrie and then go from there. So thanks for joining us, and we will catch you next time, guys. Thanks.